Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Roots and Wings, where we talk about growth, growing businesses with intention and strategy. I am Jennifer He. I am a fractional chief marketing officer.
Hi, everybody. I'm David Solomon, and I'm a fractional chief revenue officer.
So, David, I know you just came back from Japan.
hmm
What are we talking about today?
let's talk about why, you know, are you ready to grow into new markets? And if so, what should be your first steps? How should you be really looking at the landscape in front of you and saying, now's the time?
Yeah. So before we do that, new market, this term, let's define that context. What do we mean by new market?
Ideally, if you're looking, look, there's different ways of looking at what we call a new market.
Mm,
The simplest way is obviously the geography. We're going to go after a new geography. If you're
mm,
in Canada, maybe the United States. If you're in Toronto, it's Montreal.
mm.
But a lot of people also don't realize that it also could mean a different customer segment. You might be already talking to one type of customer who's been great, but there's another type of customer. That's a new market.
Mhm.
Also, it could be a question of how you delivering. We talk about, traditional, what you're doing from
Yeah,
e-commerce to
it can
traditional.
be a new channel, right?
Right, new
Your
channels. So
e-business. You can
so
go to a physical retail.
absolutely. So really, when we talk about growth can come in a variety of different ways. Like I said, geography, customer segment, distribution channels,
And
uh,
new industry as well,
and
right?
new
You might
industry.
serve one industry, but you think, oh, I wanted to expand to another vertical, another industry.
That's it.
Uh, that can be a new market.
Absolutely. And so really, Jennifer, the thing is that we all get excited and we're all, we're creatures of habit. And creatures of habit, we want to do the same thing because it's comfortable. We know it. But when it's time to come for new, now the question is, where do we go? Why do we go?
Mhm.
That's the key. It's not just because a friend of mine told me, or I heard it on the news, or, I was in Florida last week and it seems like a good idea. Before you jump into new market, you have to ask yourself a whole bunch of questions before you jump into that.
Yeah. So we're entering into an "Are you ready?" conversation,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
in your experiences, David, and in your work, like what are the signs a business is ready to enter a new market?
Well, I think that what you have to do is you have to have a degree of maturity. And I think that when I'm saying that maturity means that you've gone in, you've maximized where you currently are at. So if you're in Toronto, let's say, or in Montreal, and that's all you've been selling, and you look at your customer base of the customer, and you will not get 100% of the customers. Let's be real. But suddenly you have a very significant market share, and getting new customers in that market is becoming harder and harder. Maybe it's time to look at another
And you
market.
you reach a plateau,
You reach
right,
the
with,
plateau,
with that
exactly.
customer base.
And in reality is waiting until that plateau is problematic because finding out where to go next may take some time. So as a company, as you plan out 2025, 2026, and you're sitting with your sales team and you're going, have we plateaued or are we nearing the plateau? That's when you should start to explore the idea of another market. You also want to make sure that you have a solid. You're in your current market. You're solid. There's a base. There's a foundation, a reputation, because you want to take that with you to that new market. So it's not just plateauing from a revenue, but also that you've hit that maturity level that you can replicate or copy what you're doing in your current market somewhere else.
Mhm. That's one sign. You've saturated the current market and you've reached a plateau. Um, what's so another sign I've seen is you validated the demand in a different customer base, right? You wanted to expand to that market.
One of the things that I find funny, Jennifer, is when a salesperson comes in and says, "I met someone not in our current market, and they want it,"
Mhm.
and we go, "Oh boy, new market, let's go." Whoa, whoa, you. just have to make sure that there's a reality behind this, or this is an outlier, or this is just an exception to the rule.
Yeah.
Because you might go to another business category or another industry,
Mm,
and there's a competitor in there who can eat you for breakfast, and it's like they're not going to come into where you're currently doing, but you going into what they're doing, you
yeah.
might find it harder. So suddenly you might have to charge less. You may have to do more service wise. It's suddenly costing you more to service that company. And
Mm-hmm.
so therefore the demand may not be there. And that's why it's best to look in different places and where is the demand at its best. Because
Mm-hmm.
once you've established yourself at home and you're solid at home, now you're looking at that new market, business category, industry, geography, whatever we want to call
Mm-hmm.
it. Now's our chance to decide, do we want to have the same or better? And
Mm-hmm.
that's where we need to validate the demand. Is there a demand with with clients with better margins?
Yeah.
Is there a demand where there are more customers?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a demand where there is less competition?
Mm-hmm.
Without validating that demand, and this comes not from Jennifer, and I know we're going to go a little wider here right now, but don't talk to a friend who was in a different business and that person says to you, you know, Jennifer, I did this. You should go here.
You reminded me of we talked about, whose opinions matter.
Right.
And also
Exactly.
you said, oh, I met a friend. I was like, my alert system all of a sudden turned on, like a friend. What do you mean? Is this friend a customer, right? Is
Right.
it one customer or group of customer? And how large is the market?
And this is the whole thing, is that without doing some research, and I'm saying there is the traditional research of, journals and databases and AI, and find out about the market and find out, a lot of things. That's just one part. Then
Mm-hmm.
there is the go to have conversations with industry leaders, go have conversations with the associations that are there, go have conversations with potential partners in that market.
And
Find
go
out,
to the market and experience it yourself
physically go. You
firsthand.
said to me, oh, you just came back from Japan. And yes, I was in Japan and I walked the streets and I talked to people and I talked to local business owners there to get a lay of the land and understand. Because when I'm thousands of kilometers away, what am I relying upon? The internet. I can find any piece of information about about something in the internet. Is it true? Is it really what's going on? Or if I talk to people, do I get a real sense of what's happening? I've also told people, if you're in B2B, go walk a trade show. Don't expose necessarily. If you can, that's good.
Mhm.
But go and walk a trade show and talk to people, talk to vendors, talk to, the organizers, talk to people, get information before you jump in both feet into a new market. Because
Mhm.
otherwise, you might just, again, anecdotally, like we
Mhm.
go back to who we trust. Yeah, my friend told me, and this is what they experienced, and I can, not necessarily in your market, not necessarily with what you're offering. No two businesses are identical. So please, when we talk about validation, it's about real, authentic research. Now, here's the scary part, Jennifer. Business owners are going to stop here and go, all right, I'm done with this podcast because I just don't have the time, the resources, or the people to go and do this. Yeah,
But
exactly.
you want to enter a new market.
You want to enter a new market, and what you're going to end up trying to do is, I'll throw in a salesperson. I hope something works out, and we'll see what occurs.
Hmm.
A lot of companies went bankrupt because of that move, because you
Hmm.
don't realize you're not looking for, like, when we're saying validated demand, and this is what I said a few seconds ago about new market. If I take what I'm currently doing and I go into a new market and I change every part of what I've done to accommodate this new market,
Hmm.
I have put stress on my business.
Hmm.
I'm essentially running two businesses at the same time with one product or service. That's a disaster. But
So
if I
this
find,
leads to, yeah, this leads to our next, readiness.
well, hold on. Before I
Oh,
get to
sorry.
the next one, it's really important, not about capacity to deliver,
Yeah.
but can you look at this market and say, what I do here, I could do
Hmm.
almost exactly here
Hmm.
before we even get the capacity,
Hmm.
before I see if I have an inventory or the people or whatever. What am I changing in my processes and my infrastructure to
Mhm.
accommodate for a new market? The less I have to change, the better it's for the organization.
Mhm.
Which then leads to the next question is, now, can I deliver? Are we ready if we do expand? Do I have the resources operationally,
Yeah.
financially, leadership wise, cash flow, you name it, and also mindset? Do
Mhm.
I have the mindset around the table of the people around me, my business leaders in my organization? Do they understand now that we're now thinking not one but two markets? And do we
Mhm.
have the capacity to expand into three and then into four? If you
Mhm.
don't have all that,
Can
you
we
can't expand.
replicate, or do we need to reinvent some of the operational delivery?
Absolutely. And really, sales will come in and they'll and Jennifer, they always say to sales, so what can we sell here? New
Mm.
market, I have no idea.
Mm.
Asking a salesperson what they're going to sell in the new market, I might as well buy a lottery ticket. I have no clue.
Strategy and marketing needs to be, first before
Absolutely. And
we
and
figure
then
out sales. Yeah.
before the salespeople get involved, what do we think we could do? Because again, being in Canada, I tell people, if you jump into the United States, do you really have the capacity to ship to 8 times the size of Canada? Probably not.
Mm.
So what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? Where is it going to come from? Do you understand the evolution? And by the way, as a business owner, you're now moving away from day to day as you grow and you expand. So are you ready?
Mhm.
Do you have that capacity
Mhm.
to pivot and shift and whatever? So there's a lot to be said before you make the first move
Mhm.
and expectations of who is going to help you get there. But if you don't have capacity and you don't strategize and research, you're not going very far.
Yeah, totally. Um, and also, you need to, reinvest your time and resources into this new market, right? If you want to expand.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to what we said before. And one of the things I tell business owners, especially if it's their first expansion,
Mm.
walk the walk, walk the shows,
Mm.
talk to people as the business owner because you need to understand what's about to happen. It's
Mhm.
your business.
Mhm.
And I hear now the business owner going, I don't have time. David, Jennifer, I don't have time.
Mhm.
Well, then don't expand. You
Mhm.
have to make a little bit of time. Now, when you bring in strategists like Jennifer and myself to help you to decide where to go, whatever, we're shortcutting a lot of that pain. There's a risk in terms of doing it on your own, but bringing in strategists like us who can look at markets in a much a 50,000 foot level and also at the 5 foot level.
Mhm.
If we're telling you, yes, you want to go in the United States, no problem, but you're going to go into New York first. Your first market's going to be New York.
Mhm.
You're not walking the whole United States. You're going to walk New York and you're going to meet people from New York and you're going to learn about that. And
And we
then
have professional tools and frameworks that
right,
will help you implement.
absolutely. And
Mhm.
and a lot of business owners, Jennifer, are saying, you guys again are talking like MBAs. Like stop
Mhm.
with the frameworks and stop with this and stop with that. But that's what helps us to help you to understand the market. Are we talking about a market where the supplier has power or that the buyer has power? You got to understand that.
Yeah.
You also have to understand your weaknesses. Do you have a certain weakness that you need to adjust before you get into the market? So
Mhm.
those are frameworks we're going to bring to the table.
Mhm.
But when we say go, now it's time to go. And you have to be prepared to do a little bit of work. Not a lot. We're not asking you to spend 90 hours a day in this
Mhm.
new market,
Yeah.
but you need to be willing to invest and not just rely on your sales team to do this. But step one might be you.
Mhm. Yeah, that's that. And also, I wanted to add, it's not about theory. Success leaves trails. So all the methods or frameworks professionals have, those are proven like universal truths. And we need to be futuristic. But meanwhile, some of the tools, they work. So why don't we just use them?
What would you, Jennifer, when you sit with a client, give us an idea of what kind of tools, when you're saying tools, like
Yeah.
what are they, what should they expect to use?
So I have a comprehensive assessment. That's one thing. I divide them into 7 sections, and after that, you're actually very clear where you are in your business and what your next steps should be, because we prioritize tasks for you and to an objective you want to achieve. I'll give you another example is, when we do research, you think, oh, market research, I do a survey. I grab, information from online or some other companies, statistics, this and that. But do you know there is a method called design triangulation? So, how we make our research insights or results credible.
Hmm.
Do you know, like, what people tell you, the insights, are they credible for you to get to the next stage, right?
Hmm.
That triangulation is not only from data perspective, it's also from methods perspective, it's also from target audience perspective. So those are the things I'm talking about. Your result, unprofessional result, is different from professional result.
And I also have a very comprehensive way of looking at things, but I start with 5 questions, and if they can
Mm,
answer these 5 questions effectively, then they're probably ready mind wise. But generally speaking, it goes back to, you know, do you have you reached a certain point in the maturity of the company to make the next move? And if you
mm,
don't, here's where you got to fix it. And often I've exposed operational issues, cash flow issues, leadership issues, not even sales issues. Like because you think you're ready, but you're not. And I think that this is really the key of what we're talking about when you do your homework. Understand what that market needs,
mm,
and do you have that? Because if you rush, you fail. And
mm,
if you try to do things by winging it, or we'll figure it out as we go along, like I said, you will fail. And
mm,
we've seen failures, even the best of companies, whether it's Target trying to come to Canada, Canadian Tire trying to come to the United States. You look at a lot of other companies that have tried to figure it out as they went along, and they didn't do the proper homework, they failed. And it costs a ton of money.
mm,
And so do you want to be that company? And listen, it doesn't mean that Canadian Tire won't try to go back into the United States, but when they tried, they failed.
mm,
Tim Hortons tried once, came back, tried again, better. You've got to be very careful because it is exciting. It's exciting to expand. You're thinking, oh my God, look at all the money we can make. Yes, but you look at all the money you could lose. You know, you also have a problem of you also have to understand, and Jennifer, I think this is where you are super incredibly knowledgeable in this area. Is I might be great in Canada and the message is one thing. The moment
mm.
I go to the United States, if I don't change the message, it's very
And,
Canadiana.
and sometimes you need to change the product. So, a new market, new product line, that takes a lot.
I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine wanted me to help him import something from Europe,
Mm,
something for bedding. It was going back a while ago,
yeah.
and he showed me the packaging, and I said no. He's like, "What do you mean no?" I said, "Not going to work. Not going to work on retail in Canada."
Mm,
Why not? I said the dimensions are wrong, and the packaging is in 8 languages.
mm,
Great for Europe, terrible for Canada.
mm,
And he's like, "Well, we're not going to spend the money to change it just for Canada, so don't come to Canada.
yeah.
Like,
In
stay in
Canada, you
Europe,
need to have English and French.
right? Stay in Europe, grow in Europe.
Mm,
Don't come to Canada if you're not willing to adapt the pack." And it was just packaging. So
mhm,
I'm not talking about, the product.
yeah.
The package was too overwhelming for for Canadian market,
Mhm,
and refused to change it. So I'm like, okay. The
mhm,
other thing which was very interesting is that the website and the phone number was still going to Europe. It had a European number, had a European flavor, and I said, look, it's not going to work.
yeah.
It's really not going to work, and they never could bring it here. So it's really not just about let's go sell and figure it out.
Yeah. And also another mistake I often see from international entrepreneurs wanted to enter like North America or any
Hmm.
other market is, the first questions they ask are mostly like regulatory questions, regulations, operations questions. But they forget about the most important thing is their customers. You need to know who you are talking to and why they
Yep,
care. Otherwise,
absolutely.
you know, to me, like regulatory questions and operations are secondary. The first is you need to understand the new customer.
And that's why I start when I tell people I start with the research. The last thing I do is the external factors. The
Hmm.
first thing I want to do is I want to understand, is this the right market for me?
Yeah.
Can I match these two markets, what I'm currently doing and where I'm going? How much can I
Hmm.
match as close as possible?
Hmm.
Because, like I said before, too much change disrupts.
Yeah.
So, if this is my first market expansion, I want it to be as close to what I'm currently doing, which does, as you said, include the customer. If the
Hmm.
customer is radically different, how do I validate what I'm doing that makes sense? So,
Yeah.
if I'm selling to a type of customer in Canada and I'm going to the United States and I'm saying, well, in Canada, I'm talking to engineers, but in the United States, I'm talking to doctors. It's not the same thing. They're not the same customer. They're not going to buy the same way and they're not going to look at it the same way. And so, validating your product or service, you can't because it's a completely different market. So, you need to understand them that you want to find as close to the customer you're currently working with in this
Yeah.
new market,
And the
because
who and then the why.
the who
They.
and the why, because then at least your messaging will be close. I mean, you
Hmm.
may have to tweak it and change it a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's as close to what you're currently doing as possible. And that is really the one of the number one takes that I give to people is don't change radically. It's just not worth it. It's
Hmm.
too disruptive.
Hmm.
And that's where the research will scream at you. Maybe United States is the wrong market. Maybe go to Australia. And you're like, wow, that's far. But Australia might be really close to Canada
Hmm.
in terms of the everything else. Yes, it's distant. Yes, there's a time change. But if it's as close to Canada as possible, why are you going to the United States?
Hmm.
I get why. But why are you
Hmm.
going to the United States if it's that disruptive to your business? And that's why expansion fails for a lot of companies.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
But on the other side, look, work. You want it to work. It's really, really simple.
Hmm.
Do your homework.
Hmm.
Do your homework. Um, Work with advisors like myself and Jennifer who understand different markets. There are cultural, linguistic, value chain differences between the markets.
Yeah.
Even Canada to the United States, we could say we're the same.
Hmm.
We are, but we're not.
Hmm.
Because while Canada and the United States as a whole, you might say is similar, selling in New York, selling in Texas, selling in California is different.
Yeah.
So you can't just say, "Hey, yeah, sure."
Yeah.
I you need to understand the nuances and the differences, and that's when it works.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
one of the common mistakes I've seen for entrepreneurs entering a new market is, uh, you know, not to have their value proposition changed or prepared, and sometimes they confuse their vision and mission with value proposition. I told them that value proposition can change often. It's not like your company vision, mission, and your brand,
absolutely.
right? Your global brand, but value proposition, you need to adapt that to a new market.
Look, vision and mission is internal. It's what I want to achieve.
Mm.
But why people buy from you
Yeah,
is their
and
reason.
what problem you solve for
What it
them?
pro- and the, that's the not that's my number one question I ask is
Mhm.
if you're going to solve the problem in market A, is it the same problem you're solving in market B? If
Yeah,
it's a different problem you're solving, is it worth going in there?
yeah,
And that's a conversation that we'll have in another podcast.
yeah.
But that's the reality is the value proposition that you talked about. Why am I buying?
Mm.
All right. You might think you have the answer. You don't. And so when you go into that new market, you might see not only is it different than what you currently believe you're doing,
Yeah,
but it's completely different than what your current customers are currently
yeah.
doing. So if you don't know why your customers are buying from you today,
Hmm.
trying to expand into a new market could be horrifically difficult
Yeah.
because you're not sure what problem you're solving. So that's why you need to know this from your current market intimately, not from
Yeah.
your perspective, but from your customer's perspective. Go sit. This is part of the research. Talk to your current customers. What are you doing for them? What's the
Mhm.
value that you're bringing to that
Mhm.
company?
Mhm.
Then can you find that in market B? If you can,
Yeah.
beautiful. If you can't, what do you think you're doing?
Yeah. Totally.
That's to me, that's the big key before you even go anywhere. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
care if it means new geography, it's a new business category, new industry, new whatever.
Hmm.
Are you solving the same problem? Because if you're not, what does that do to your business? And that's to me, that's what scares me when we're talking about expansion.
Hmm.
So smartly, sustainably, not
Yeah.
as you say, forced, don't
Hmm.
rush it.
Hmm.
The hockey stick effect, that zoom growth
Yeah.
will
It needs
happen
to
soon enough.
feel aligned, not forced, but strategy wise, you need to align.
And it's not just, and it's internally, it's everybody from your salespeople to your operations to your finance to your, everybody needs to
Yeah.
be aligned to understand that all the thinking that we're doing is to solve this problem.
Hmm.
Therefore, if we're solving it this problem here, we could solve it the problem somewhere else,
Hmm.
and now we can grow smartly. Everybody's thinking growth,
Hmm.
not finger pointing, not saying my operations are the, no, 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 you're thinking together, and now you have the right people around the table. That's what you, this is where it stands out for you, is to see, oh wait, this person might said they were, but they're really not. Now I know what I need to do.
Hmm.
So to kind of recap everything,
Yeah.
really think when you're talking new market before you jump into new geography. Is there another business category? Is there another vertical that you can go to really capture that market? Are you solving the problems? This problem is the same that you can bring to another opportunity there.
Yeah. Does your
Uh,
new audience have the same problem?
they have the same problem, and if it's not the same, is it slightly different? So
Yeah.
you,
Do you
you're
solve
not
a different problem for a new audience
right.
with the same
Don't
product? You
Yeah,
need to
don't over
ask
disrupt
yourself
your
all those
business.
questions.
Absolutely, absolutely. We need to make sure expansion makes sense. Right now we're in very interestingly volatile times. And I don't know when you're listening to this recording, folks, but it's a volatile time. It's always a good opportunity to grow. But where are you going? And does it make sense
Hmm.
in the timing? Because not
Hmm.
everywhere makes sense.
Hmm.
Because people want your product or service, but you have to make sure that the timing is right, the fit is right, and they're ready for you.
Yeah.
And folks, be careful. Don't, like, to me, big eyes means big problems. Start off small, especially if this is your first expansion. Start off small and smart,
Hmm.
and watch the profitability go through the roof. That's really what it is. It comes down
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. So we're wrapping up today's episode. And, have you thought about going to a new market? If so, which market? And what's holding you back? That's actually my questions I want to leave here.
And
So,
folks, if you really want help, if this is if and there are only a handful of things really why we're holding you back. But if you're unsure, you have two people here who are ready to help you today to decide to help you to discover that. So
mhm.
if you want help in discovering that new market, please reach out to us. You could message us through, here at YouTube, or you can reach out to us. Our contact
On
information
LinkedIn.
is on LinkedIn. Our contact information is in the description. Reach out. Let's have a conversation. Where do you want to go? Where are you looking for financial freedom, or are you looking for that legacy opportunity?
Mm,
Why are you looking to expand? What's in that for you?
mm.
Let us help you and guide you in terms of that to make it done right.
Yeah. Until next time, thank you for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone. See you.
Bye.